welcome to the second episode of On the Grid, an F1 podcast. Today we're going to start by talking about some pre-Bahrain race stories before actually discussing the race itself. We'll then end with our opinion sections and some quick hits. Just a disclaimer here right now at the top of the show that if you haven't watched the race, you don't know what happened, we're going to have a link to an Autoblog review in the description, so please read that before you watch the rest of the show. And I guess, we'll start with the first pre-race story, and it's Pirelli's decision to change the tires a week before the race actually happened. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think it threw the teams off a little. Teams had come into this weekend, with an idea of what they wanted to push for, what they wanted to have at the center of the race. And, changing the tires 1 week to the race, it threw them off, but it made for an interesting race. Again, some teams benefited from this. Red Bull, Sebastian Vettel, Kimi Räikkönen, that was great. But I honestly don't think that they should do this moving forward because they're trying to get that contract for next year, and they need some stability. They need to show that they can, they can predict what's going to happen and be consistent in their details.
What do you think, Greg?
To be honest with you, I think Pirelli saw what happened in China, specifically with the soft tire. And they decided, since Bahrain is a hotter place than China, they knew that they would have to, rethink their tire decisions. So, I think, like Julia said, certain teams benefited from it, others didn't. Specifically with Red Bull and the hard tire, they really, really, really benefited from it, especially Sebastian Vettel, who keeps showing race in and race out that he's able to, conserve his tires and still, get these massive leads out of nowhere. But, going back to Pirelli, I think, they recognize that their tire compound is relatively unstable.
Yeah.
And they know that it can affect races for better or for worse. So I think Pirelli's decision was a conscious decision. Whether it was a good one or a bad one is up for interpretation. It depends on whose side you're on. But I think in terms of viewership, I think in terms of, excitement, it made for a better Bahrain Grand Prix.
I'm on the same page as you guys. I definitely think that they made a good decision. It was a little late, but, the fact that we still saw 3 and 4 stops meant, they had to do that. If they had gone with the same tires, they would have struggled.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's do another one. Another story that, was widely discussed in the last couple of weeks was, Mark Webber moving over to Porsche in the LMP1 section. But, now he's come out and flatly denied those rumors. What do you guys think? Do you think he'll commit next year again? He's on a rolling contract.
Yeah, we have to think about the fact that Webber is on a rolling contract and how important it is, to show that. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything here, but this is my theory. I think that it is important for Webber to show that he has options. Every time around this, every season around this time, Webber comes up with a couple of options, and this is, I guess, what helps him in the contract debate. Sitting down with Christian Horner and whatever, and saying, "Hey, I need a new contract, or I need a raise."
Yeah.
I have a deal with these other people. I have a deal with last season. You remember he even went to the Ferrari factory and hung out there, and
He did.
Those rumors of him, sitting in a Ferrari and things like that. This is a man that's trying to show you that, hey, I have options. So that could be one way to look at it. The other way is that all the controversy that's been happening, everything that's been going on this past few weeks, do you really blame him? No. But for him to come out and say, hey, I'm not moving, I'm not going anywhere, it says something about, his intention for the team, because a lesser driver would have let that go on, but he needs the team to be settled because it is a team sport after all. They're working for themselves as individuals, but F1 is a team sport, and he's trying to say, let's focus on the team right now. I'm not going anywhere. I'm trying to win, the champion, because it's the only championship he wins is the team championship. So,
what do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I think the case with Webber, like Julia said, is give me a reason to stay. I think Mark Webber is definitely a competent driver. He may not be Sebastian Vettel, but I think when called upon, he could definitely benefit the team, and he's shown that. So whether he stays or not is totally up to him. I think the controversy with Vettel and the clear favoritism that Red Bull is showing towards Vettel, it gives Mark Webber a reason to think about whether he wants to stay with the team or not. But it just comes down to whether he's willing to deal with it. I mean, a lot of drivers dealt with the same things. I mean, you looked at Rubens Barrichello with Michael Schumacher at Ferrari. It's basically the same thing. So if Webber wants to stay in F1, I'm sure he's going to have other suitors. It's not just Red Bull. I'm sure other teams would be willing to take him. But he has to concede that if he's not going to stay with the team, then he's obviously looking for a potential step down, right? Yeah. And if he suddenly decides that he's had enough of F1, then by all means go to Porsche. I mean, it's there. Porsche have of course denied it, because if they don't deny it, then that just spreads controversy. Yeah. But you would have to assume that the opportunity is there. It's Mark Webber.
So now we're going to go on to the race itself. We're just going to go over the top 5 finishes. So in first was Sebastian Vettel, followed by both Lotuses, Kimi Räikkönen and Romain Grosjean. Paul di Resta came home in a strong 4th place, and Lewis Hamilton rounded off the top 5, coming in 5th. So what does this mean in the championship? Well, Vettel still leads. Kimi Räikkönen stays in 2nd, but Hamilton leapfrogs Fernando Alonso, so Hamilton's in 3rd, and now Alonso drops to 4th. In the Constructors' title, Red Bull continues to dominate. Followed by Lotus, Ferrari, Force India, and McLaren. I think I missed Mercedes there, but it's okay. So, Sebastian Vettel dominated yet another race. I mean, this reminds me of 2011. So, you know what? We're going to go over this quickly, so I'm just going to give this to Greg. Greg, go.
About what?
Sebastian Vettel.
Sebastian Vettel. Frankly, I'm bored of the guy. I really am. I mean, I think, look, there's, whether you're a fan, whether you're not a fan, you can't deny that the guy's got talent. I mean, he's probably the one of the best drivers to ever race in F1. I mean, I think that's safe to assume, right? I mean, he's just completely dominated in an era that hasn't exactly had slouches in it. I mean, you have the likes of Fernando Alonso, Kimi Räikkönen, Jenson Button, Lewis Hamilton. Yes, I had to throw Button in there. So he hasn't. Button in there. Yeah, of course. So look, I mean, he's dominating, and look, personally, I'm bored of seeing the guy up front. Right, I would like to see someone else. Okay, but you can't deny that he's clearly got this thing mastered, and and he's showing it. I mean, if he wins a 4th championship, then he deserves it. So.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, I think
that's
he's speaking for the 3 of us here. I think we're all on the same page there. So we're going to go on to more important topics, Yes. So let's start with Lotus. I mean, once again, very strong at Bahrain, coming in 2nd and 3rd. Grosjean finally putting those troubles behind. Do you guys think that Grosjean has turned a corner and Lotus can continue to push?
Well, I guess, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that Lotus is strong in Bahrain. They got 2-3 last year, 2-3 this year. So that maybe is a track advantage, which you can never rule out. Also, he got a new chassis, so maybe he has actually turned a new leaf and he's trying to move forward. I have nothing against the guy. I think he's a brilliant driver. Yeah. People gave him a lot of crap last season, but I figured that was a new driver trying to adjust to the pace of F1. And when he did get a chance, he put in some really good runs. So
think of Valencia last year.
Yeah, and honestly, Lotus need both drivers to compete in the Constructors' Championship. They took some points out of Red Bull's lead this weekend. With a 2-3 and Mark Webber lounging in the back, they did take some points out. So they're gonna need both drivers to compete at the front. If Red Bull still have their prize driver and are not giving enough to Mark Webber, then that's what Lotus need to do. Just give opportunities to both of the drivers, and they will compete.
So I guess, my question to Greg now is, Grosjean's, we've gone 4 races this season so far, and Grosjean's not been involved in one first-lap incident. Is he going to be able to show the form that took him the GP2 championship?
Are you asking me this question because you know my opinions of the Spa crash? Or anyway, whatever. Look, the point is this. Yes,
that was a bad crash.
It was. I mean, and we can debate whether whose fault it is. Yes, Grosjean was involved. But I think, Grosjean is clearly showing that he's matured in F1. I mean, not everyone, with the exception of maybe Lewis Hamilton when he came into F1, has shown, to be super mature and to be able to cope with the pressure. So you have to give Grosjean, a bit of slack for that. And now it's his 2nd year in F1, and he's finally showing that he's able to cope with the pressure. He's driving well. He's doing his best to compliment Kimi Räikkönen. And I think he's doing a great job of that. So as far as Grosjean's position in F1 is concerned, I think he's where he needs to be, and he's showing that he deserves it.
So it was a better weekend for McLaren. I mean, they've had a rough start to the season, but Perez, he gave it as good as it got to Button, if not a little bit more. And I think it's fair to say they had a very good fight, if not pushing the limit a little bit more. So, being the Button fan.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, sure.
Look, in terms of finishing the race, Perez finished ahead of Button. Fine, I concede that. The only problem I have with what actually happened was the fact that, given Perez's behavior, it hurt both of them. And I think that issue is on Martin Whitmarsh. I think he should have told Jenson Button, because Sergio Perez was faster than Jenson Button was when all that commotion was happening. He was on fresher tires, he was driving better, and Button was essentially trying to hold place. That's what he was trying to do. He was on older tires, he knew it. The degradation was definitely coming into play, right? This goes back to the instability of the Pirelli tires. Okay? So I think that situation was badly managed by McLaren. On the flip side, I think Perez was a bit too aggressive. But at the same time, Button wasn't exactly easing up either. They were being too aggressive and they were killing themselves. And the fact that both cars finished, I think, can actually be called a miracle, because they had a few incidents, I'm sure you saw, that they easily could have crashed into each other, and that could have been the end of it. It could have been Canada all over again for McLaren, right? Now, of course, referring to Canada 2011. So I think that was a badly managed situation on the part of Martin Whitmarsh. He should have told Button to let Perez pass him. Right. And then be done with it. Because, look, I'm biased toward Jenson Button, but at the same time, I mean, you have to look at it for what it is. Button was slower, Perez was faster, and Whitmarsh should have just told Button to move over. Seniority in that case doesn't apply.
I think it's a fair point, but, we've been talking... Well, maybe the sport has been talking a lot about team orders recently. Is this a case where you think team orders are acceptable?
Because, honestly, I think... what the trick was for McLaren was they were the team that came out openly and criticized Red Bull for having team orders, for Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber. So Button comes out and says, I don't think team orders are necessary at this point of the season. Whitmarsh says they should let the boys race. All right. Next weekend, it's between Button and Sergio Perez. So what do you do as a team principal that said, let's let the boys race? What do you do as a number one driver in the team that said they should let them race? You can't ask for team orders at this point, right? Yeah. So I think Sergio Perez was exploiting this. And then he had his number one backer in the stands as well. You have the world's richest man here to see whether he should keep giving you money. You have to show him that you're worth every dollar he's giving you. So that was a very complicated situation, very unique.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens in the future.
Can I just add one more point before we move on?
Go ahead.
This just goes back to whether, to the outspokenness of certain people in F1. Personally, if it's not your team, and of course this is my opinion, feel free to disagree with me. If it's not your team, you have absolutely no business on commenting on anybody else, because it's the same thing with the incident that Vettel and Webber had with the front wing. I believe it was at Silverstone, right? And Vettel just says, well, it's hard to judge from the outside. Of course, that was just to shield the obvious that Vettel was being favored. But even if you're on the paddock and you're at a different pit wall, right? You don't know what's going on in, say, the Red Bull team, the Ferrari team. So you have no business commenting on that. So Whitmarsh should not have commented on the whole Red Bull situation, because it actually, in the end, came back to bite him. And Julius said it very well. He said that it was an issue of consistency. If Whitmarsh had turned around and said, let Perez pass, he would have looked like a hypocrite.
Right.
So I think that definitely plagued them. But again, I will say that it was a dangerous situation, and Whitmarsh should have managed it better than he actually did. So
yeah,
that's all I have to say about that.
So, good weekend for McLaren, bad weekend for Ferrari.
Average weekend for McLaren.
Alonso, DRS problems. One lap, he tries opening it, and then he goes back in. And the same lap, the next time around, he tries opening again, and same problem. And Massa, damaging his front wing on the first lap, and 2 punctures in the race. They had the worst car, one of the worst cars of those top runners last year. but they fought through. Now that they have a fast car, is luck just deserting them?
I think it's not really a change in luck. We have talked about Fernando Alonso's bad luck. You know, like he last season, you know, it was his inconsistency that cost him the championship. I do not blame like the car because he found a way to make the car work.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was just down to him not finishing enough races. You know,
Mm-hmm.
this season it's already happening. You know, he's the only top runner not to finish. You know, like a race. So you got to think about these things. Fernando Alonso has what it takes to win championships. Nobody's disputing
Nobody's
that.
denying that.
But we need more consistency. Maybe if they spoke in English, I insist. Maybe if they spoke in English.
You know, I
But-
don't think Alonso is allowed to push, right? When his DRS is broken, he cannot push.
No, but think about how
So-
well he drove for a man without DRS. He drove finished
He did.
in the points.
And that's aerodynamically unstable if you think about it. If you're going around a corner with your DRS flap open, you can spin.
I mean, no, they closed it.
They
and
closed it, yeah.
Well,
and that's
well,
how-
you know,
but
he
for
means,
the
yeah.
no, but for the duration where it was open, it was what was it? It
wasn't
was
that
like
long.
2
It
or
was-
3 laps.
It was 3
right?
corners.
yeah, because
right,
he was like
corners. I'm sorry.
I mean, he radioed in saying,
DRS.
"My rear tires are gone."
Right.
You know, like we need to change tires. They're like, no, it's not the tires, it's the DRS. So like that's how much of an effect the DRS flap being open has on the car. You have no
It just
support
unseats
from
the
the
entire
back.
car,
Yeah,
yes.
so
Exactly.
that was a big problem.
Because it's
for him.
essentially a hole.
But then again, it shows you the kind of racer he is. You know, any other driver would have said, okay, well, this is a good enough excuse for me not to finish well. Or Jenson Button would have parked the car. We have seen this happen on
When?
enormous occasions
When?
where Jenson Button has a problem in the race and he parks the car. So
You're
maybe
talking
that's
about-
McLaren's strategy versus Ferrari's strategy. You know,
Okay,
but
never mind.
I think he came out with as many points as he could given his situation. You know?
Okay.
So
All right, fair enough. I'm not gonna argue.
Let's let that go.
Let's let it go. We'll deal with it after the show.
Okay.
Next subject, please.
Okay, so we're going to go over Massa then, but let's talk about some post-race stories. I mean, you know, the biggest one, in my opinion, was, you know, Bahrain's contract is up at the end of 2016, so they've got 3 more races to go. But there are already reports that they're going to get a new 5-year deal. That's going to take them to 2021. Do you guys want Bahrain on the calendar?
You should start with it.
I'm gonna say that I look forward to tracks. I look forward to these different locations because of the different ways they test the cars.
Mhm.
You know, you look at maybe places like Monaco. You know, for the. I mean, okay, Monaco is Monaco. Let's not even talk about Monaco.
You can't put.
Okay?
Don't
Okay?
go there.
But yeah, but you look at Australia for, you know, the wear and the tires. You look at Canada for those long runs. All these races have something different they challenge the car with, and that's why we find different cars emerge, you know, like as victors in all these different tracks. Bahrain is one of those, you know, new age tracks, you know, with all the technology and everything and clean tracks and beautiful asphalt, but it really doesn't have a unique challenge.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have anything amazing about it, like a turn or a tunnel or something that
Exactly.
makes it unique and makes people look forward to it. So honestly, I'm not saying throw it off, but I'm not saying that I would be devastated if they didn't race in Bahrain.
I think that's
So,
relatively right on. I think because if you look at Bahrain, it's just asphalt in the middle of a desert. I mean, there's no luge, for example, right? I mean, there's no landmark corner or straight or something. And didn't Kimi Räikkönen say that was one of the most boring tracks he's ever
said that
driven?
about Abu
It was
Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi.
Oh, it was Abu
Abu
Dhabi.
Dhabi.
Okay, all right. But look, there are already 20 races on the calendar. 19 or 20.
19.
Yeah. Well, 20 next year
With
with
New Jersey.
with New Jersey. So look, if Bahrain gets off the calendar, gets taken off the calendar, I don't think anybody's going to complain. Only because of, you know, the history that it's had. There has been, and even this year, you know, there's political instability. Formula One isn't exactly welcome there, right? As much as it is in, say, I don't know, Monaco. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the track is removed, I share the same opinion as Julius. I would not be devastated, and I think, to be honest with you, I think the teams would welcome that because, as much as they love racing, as much as we love watching them, Formula One's a grueling sport, and if you keep on, you know, going to these locations and having these rigorous schedules and stuff, and spending, you know, boatloads of money that everybody's criticizing the sport about, it doesn't help anyone. So personally, I think Bahrain, wouldn't be a big loss. That's me.
So I have a follow-up question here. I mean, firstly, only 28,000 people attended just because of all the security they have on Sunday.
Right.
Also,
It's not even widely attended. There you go.
Also, there are rumors that it's going to become a night race. Would that be something that you maybe would be interested in, Bahrain being a night race?
Well, we already have a night race,
Singapore.
in Singapore, and now I'm thinking.
And technically Abu Dhabi.
And now I'm thinking, well, it's not really.
Yeah.
Well, it gets dark.
I get what you mean, but
It's
anyway,
a sunset race.
Yeah, it's a sunset race.
It's picturesque.
Anyway, what I'm thinking now is, in a location that's already been proven to be not the most secure, or like not the most security intensive place, or not the most peaceful place for Formula One drivers and Formula One crew. Do you really want to add the night to the whole, ordeal? Do you want drivers coming in to drive at night in a place that they're not, necessarily safest? It's not as safe as Monaco.
Right.
Monaco, you have drivers coming in on mopeds, to race, and this happens a lot.
True.
Because
their house is next door.
Yeah. Do you really want this in Bahrain? So, I mean, it will be better for us, in the West, to watch the races, because a night race means we get to wake up later.
Exactly.
But
I agree.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's the best way to go. It's maybe another way to improve it, but no.
Plus, you have to modify the track, so it's more money.
Okay,
That's true.
that's right. I mean, yeah. So I lied when I said we were doing post-race stories. It's just one story. So we're going to go on to our opinion section, and this is, for those of you who do know, Lewis Hamilton, obviously, at the end of FP3, had, from what we can tell, was a tire delamination, which then resulted in him having to, it was a forced gearbox change. So what our topic was, Ross Brawn has then now come out saying in situations like that, he'd want no penalty to be applied because Lewis Hamilton got a 5-place grid penalty. What do you guys think? Do you think he's right?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you interpret the rules. I mean, I think this is a case of necessity versus just let's replace the gearbox. I mean, to give ourselves, because look, you also have to remember, didn't Webber get a gearbox penalty last year?
He got a couple.
Yeah, he got it right, and it wasn't, and not all of them were because his tire exploded. It's because he wanted more performance during the race. So there's a difference between replacing your gearbox for race performance and replacing your gearbox because you were forced to because of whatever Lewis Hamilton had.
Right.
Okay, so it depends on it depends on how you interpret it. I do not think the penalty was warranted, only because of what actually happened. He had all these problems that forced him to change his gearbox. Again, keyword here being forced. Okay, so I think what Ross Brawn said wasn't wrong. I do think the grid penalty was a bit harsh, and ultimately that damaged his race. It really did. I mean, his start wasn't too great either, so it didn't exactly help him.
I'm guessing you have a similar opinion to him.
Yeah, totally. But then again, I do agree with you, Greg, but then, what I saw as being a contentious issue here was, now how do we ascertain, who's changing, because they're having actual performance issues, or who's just changing for that extra edge? Because the reason why, there's two reasons why they have this rule in place. Is one, for the cars or the companies that have more resources than others not to exploit those resources.
Sure.
And the second one is just for consistency, because this is one of the things that are, you test for durability. It's one of the things you test for in F1. So that's why you're allowed so many engines in a race, in a season. That's why you're allowed so many gearbox changes. So I think it also comes down to consistency. You failing to reach that required number of races for whatever reason, is also a problem of consistency. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I talk and say that Mercedes don't have the most reliable car on the track today.
They don't.
I mean, we've seen that so far.
So I guess it's all about reliability issues then for them.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So what about in cases where we saw last year, USA, where Ferrari purposely broke the seal on Massa's gearbox so that he would get the gearbox penalty? Is that some place where you do maybe harsher penalties because they're doing it for the race strategy, whereas in other cases it's because the gearbox is broken because it wasn't reliable enough?
But then now think about how much this just gets the FIA way more involved in team affairs than any team is comfortable with. Because, fine, they did it for strategy, you know, but then that means that's going to mean that they're going to have to thoroughly analyze every situation before they give a penalty or, you know, decide what degree of penalty to give. And remember, all this has to be done before the grid comes out.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a really short time for this amount of investigation and all this to happen. So, you know, they should probably keep the standard and then maybe have an allowance for an appeal. You know, like on, but then again, I don't know. Maybe
but by the time they appeal, the race is over.
Like, exactly. So maybe they should have like maybe they should have an allowance for an appeal before the race starts, an overnight meeting. I guess I don't know, because there's rules against breaking garage, and teams do that every now and then.
There's curfews,
yeah, and things like that. So it's, I don't know. It will differ from one situation to another. We've decided.
Yeah. So then, how about the penalty system in general? I mean, we see like Webber got his 3-place penalty because, you know, he cut too far for Verne and he hit Verne. Do you think something like that deserves a 3-place penalty when Gutierrez got a 5-place penalty for, you know, hitting Sutil in the back? Why is there this discrepancy?
Look, as is the case with many sports, you know, football being one of them, not American football,
Soccer.
Actual football, soccer, yes. There's no clear-cut thing that says, okay, this deserves this penalty. Okay? It all depends on who's looking at the issue. If you take the stewards in Monaco versus the stewards in, I don't know, Japan, you might end up with two completely different penalties for the same exact issue. So whether a penalty is too harsh, whether it's too soft, again, it depends. You know, the rules try to state the relative nature of the incident that would require such a penalty. But again, it's up to, you know, whoever is, shall we say, refereeing the race, right? To determine what's best. So, you know, the Webber versus, you know, whoever else, again, it's up to interpretation.
Also what the drivers did, you know. What Webber did last weekend in Bahrain could have been very bad. Could have ended very bad for both of them. Mm-hmm. But both drivers really managed to control the outcome, you know?
Yeah.
And drive, you know, with expertise. Of course, you know, Webber has unmatched experience in the sport. So he knew what he was doing, you know? So when you have something like that, I think the stewards are going to look at it and say, this could have been worse than it was. You know, we have to give the drivers credit for having this come out the way it was. It's, you know, it's not Spa. You know, it didn't end that badly. So,
okay.
Yeah, I think the stewards are allowed to exercise a certain level of discretion.
We're going to end the show by doing some quick hits now. I mean, for those of you who aren't familiar with this kind of format, it's I ask a question, they each have 30 seconds to respond to the question. So question... Are you guys ready?
Get ready, get pumped.
You ready? Okay, so I'm starting a timer now.
Okay.
Question 1. This is the first one.
You're going to cut us off.
I'm going to cut you off. Okay, so you guys have got to watch it.
Alright.
Paul di Resta had a very strong race. He was only pipped to that podium with 6 laps to go.
Yes.
What can they do for the rest of the season?
Put a turbocharger on his car. That's yours.
I think what...
You got 30 seconds.
The intelligent answer here is that I think... God, what does he drive for? Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to start you again.
Completely threw me off.
No, go with this.
I'm going to start you again now. You've got 30 seconds to intelligently respond to this question.
Okay. I think Force India have done an amazing job with this car. Honestly, like, big ups to you guys. What they have to do now is just make sure that they're matching the front runners, you know, at long run speeds, you know, like long distance speed, race, long pace. Focus on that now because they do have the qualifying pace they need. Really, you do not need to qualify ahead of Sebastian Vettel, you know?
30 seconds.
Yes.
Europe.
Turbocharger, no. Look, you clearly have the talent in Paul di Resta and Sutil, yes, exactly. Sorry.
Go. I'm not giving you more time.
Okay, you clearly have the talent. Find the consistency, find the race pace, find the qualifying pace. You know, like Julia said, you don't need to out-qualify Sebastian Vettel, but find a way to get it done and you should be fine.
Okay, that was good. That was a good test run.
Thank you.
This is the second question, which I think some people will find more important. We've seen a big difference between Mercedes' race pace and their qualifying pace.
Yes.
First, this 2-part question.
Yes.
Is this a problem?
Well,
and what can they do to fix it? You're going first this time. You got 30 seconds.
Okay. Yes, it's a problem.
You got 30 seconds.
Okay, yes, it's a problem. We do know this, it's a problem, because it's obviously not helping them out. What can they do to fix it? Like I said last week, tighten the bolts a little tighter on the car, or find some solution to fix all the reliability issues, because you have the manpower to do it, you have the brains, just do it. Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton, fantastic winning drivers. Lewis is a world champion, Nico's has the potential to get there. Fix the problems and you should be fine, because like you said, their race pace is their problem, and as soon as they find that, they should be contenders.
Done. You.
I think it's a big problem because getting pole, we've realized with Mercedes, does not translate to winning races, right? They've gotten two pole positions now, and they haven't won a single race. So what they need to do now is think about how can we reduce maybe that 1 lap speed, or keep that 1 lap speed without compromising our race pace, because that's what matters. Okay, Vettel's going to get you on the long run, and so is Alonso. So they need to maybe at least find a way to just stay quick enough to compete. They don't have to find 2 extra seconds. Just compete.
Hey, I think that went well. I mean,
And believe in Ross Brawn.
believe in Ross Brawn.
In Brawn we trust,
In
or
Brawn we trust.
or they trust.
So that's going to wrap up another episode of On the Grid, an F1 podcast. Joining me have been Greg and Julius. And, you know, F1's going to be off for 3 weeks before we go back and we start the European races. And we will hopefully be back in time for Spain. Check us out later. Bye.
Go.
If you liked this episode of On the Grid, we'd appreciate it if you liked our Facebook page by clicking here. Follow us on Twitter by clicking here. And check out our website up here.
Is that it? Are we good?
Are we good?
We're good.
Done. Who said you could ride? You suck.
You're not allowed to know an elevator.